Hey there, I'm Sadaf Bainan, and this is Podjunction Podcast, the show where business leaders share how they're using podcasting to grow, connect, and build their brands. Today I'm talking to Dan Bond, VP of Marketing at RevLifter and host of Browse Basket Buy, the show where he digs into how shoppers think, behave, and actually decide to buy. Dan, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Dan, let's start with Browse Basket Buy. What was happening in your world that made you say, right, it's time to start a podcast?
Yeah, so I've been a marketer for something like 20 years. And so part of that process is always looking for opportunities to get your the brand, the company you work for, to get it in front of the people you want to speak to. So in our case at RevLifter, so what we do, we're an e-commerce technology company. So we do what we call intelligent offers, promotions and discounts for retailers. And so we're just trying to get in front of as many of those as possible. They all have essentially challenges around conversions, increasing AOV, increasing repeat purchase, and how you do that. And promotions and discounts have always been a way to do that. And what we do is we try to do it intelligently. So we try to reduce the sort of downsides of that. And so it's trying to get that message in front of people. We want to let them know who RevLifter are, what we do. We've got a clear idea of our target audience. And then we want to position ourselves as, thought leaders, people who have who are deeply involved in this community, who really understand it, understand the challenges, and can come up with ways of solving those challenges and can help and support e-commerce marketers. It's really e-commerce marketers and anyone responsible for e-commerce performance that we're targeting. So they are a distinct group. They sort of have an identity to them in terms of how they think about their problems and the world they inhabit. And so we're just trying to show that we're a part of that world and that we can help people with that and we can support them as much as possible. And that's what the podcast really was launched to help us do.
Awesome. So what does it do for you at this stage then? I know you're quite early on. So is it brand credibility, relationship building? What are you seeing?
It's actually turned out to be a mixture of a few things. I think initially we started it with the idea of it being purely really thought leadership and positioning ourselves in the right way. But actually, I think one of the main benefits has been, as we've had people on, we've had a lot of people who also already have a kind of presence in the e-commerce community, and so having those people on has actually been really good for networking. So, they're either interested, they might work for an e-commerce agency, so they might be interested in a partnership opportunity, or they might be able to introduce us to other people, connect us to people, connect us to events, tell us about things we didn't know about. So, yeah, initially it started off purely as a kind of thought leadership and a positioning piece for us, but yeah, there's a big component of it that's been a benefit, which is kind of getting you involved in the e-commerce community and connecting you with people, and that's actually been quite a big benefit as well. And we've had quite a few opportunities arise off the back of those connections that we're making.
Fantastic. So you've already seen the podcast open doors or spark different kinds of conversations that you weren't initially expecting, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bit of a mixture. So I've had a couple of higher profile guests on that we paid for. That was deliberately to kind of give it a bit of a jump start at the beginning. And that's interesting. Obviously, they already have a built-in audience they bring. And so that gets you in front of quite a lot of people. But even the people we've invited on who we didn't pay for and have just done it for free because they're sort of interested in doing it and they want to try and grow their own network. They've been really beneficial because they have a small following, but they have a really good, strong following. So actually, some of those episodes with the lower profile people have had a really good engagement, a really good reach to people that we otherwise wouldn't have connected with. So yeah, there's been other benefits there as well.
That's interesting. You're only a handful of episodes in. What surprised you so far?
I think the most surprising thing has been where I thought I was prepared for it. It might be quite a lot of work. So I run all of marketing for RevLifter. So obviously there's lots of other elements to that as well. I've got to look after our website and our email and our social media and all that kind of stuff. So I thought this in itself could be quite a lot of work. But actually, with a lot of the tools and technologies and things, and some of the Gen AI tools, actually, I'm using those to save quite a lot of time in the production. Actually, what's far more time consuming is finding guests and finding the right people and connecting and getting people to commit and doing that kind of side of things. So I assumed perhaps production would take up most of the time, but actually it's much more sourcing guests and getting them to commit and getting all those sort of admin side of things arranged. That's actually taken up more time than I expected.
I would agree. I think finding guests is one of the hardest things because you want them to align. They need to be a fit interpersonal and with your audience as well.
Yep.
But I find it interesting actually how you've said that the production side of things and all the other technical stuff, you've just been able to absorb because you're already doing marketing in so many different ways.
Yes, yeah, a lot of them fit into the flow. So I already use Gen AI to do a lot of content creation and help on that side of things. Don't use it, don't allow it to just do it all on its own, but it certainly supports and helps with that. So using that to help, and particularly now with the ability to, a lot of the tools will do auto transcriptions. So you can automatically get a script of the podcast interview. And then, we can feed that into the tool and just say, write me a summary of this. And it will just very quickly produce you quite a short summary. And I'll be able to use that, in the show notes, etc. So there's lots of little tools which, there's still some effort required in things like distribution and making sure that, getting it out there and getting it in front of people. But AI can save a lot of time in the sort of, the writing up of things, preparing the notes and all that follow-up sort of stuff, helping draft questions before I do the interview as well, all that sort of thing. So, it's saving a lot of time on that prep work, which would have taken a long time in the past. But it still needs a bit of checking over and things to make sure it all still, fits in with what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So how are you repurposing the content that you're creating out of those podcasts?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways. So, as I say, first of all, we take that transcript of the interview, feed it in, and I use Gen AI tools to help me get that into a nice summary, so that, and then we can post that on the website. So we have a website with every episode, as well as posting it onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and it goes up on YouTube. So obviously, to go with all those recording, you need text to go with all those things. So it helps me just generate those little descriptions, the show notes, etc. So creating all that, and then also doing clips. So out of every episode, I create 4 clips, and again, we use tools that just make that a little bit easier than it needs to be. And each of those clips, again, needs to be posted, needs a little bit of text to go with it to describe what the clip is about, and then use those clips to promote the episode as well. So that's the process. And the clips are easier as well, because when we do a bit of prep work in advance, we pre-draft the questions. I typically find we try to aim for a 20 to 30 minute episode. We have time for about 4 or 5 questions. You actually don't have that much time for that many questions, because obviously it sparks a bit of a conversation. It sparks quite a bit of chat. So I'm able to then break that up and go, well, I've got 4 questions. So that's 4 clips. So I'll clip a little bit out of each one, whatever I thought was the most pertinent bit, and then share those. And those go up on YouTube, and they go on LinkedIn as well, and generally on social media, Facebook and X as well. So repurposing it that way to keep sharing the content. As we're in early stages, I suspect there might be more chances for repurposing in the future as well. I can imagine us doing a sort of best of, getting lots of multiple clips and stuff and putting them together. But that's what we've done so far. It's certainly the little clips certainly help to drive people to watch the full episode as well.
Yeah. So is that working well then?
Yeah, it does. So for each episode, we put out as a LinkedIn Live, and it's a bit of a this is like a little secret insight. It's not actually live. We pre-record it because it's a lot easier to pre-record it rather than actually try and do it live. But then we put it out as a LinkedIn Live, and so that has a registration on it on LinkedIn. We get a small number, but not a large number of people signing up. But certainly most of the watching of it and the engagement with it comes afterwards. So we then post it. Once it's gone live on there, it goes on our website, it goes on YouTube, it goes on, the full episode obviously stays on LinkedIn as well. We put it on Spotify, we put it on Apple Podcasts, and then use the clips to kind of say, here's an interesting little insight from it, watch the full episode here. And that's typically when most of the watching of it and the listening and the engagement comes is in the few weeks after that. And where we've got quite high profile guests as well, some of those episodes are still getting a reasonable amount of listens as well.
Dan, something I'm really curious about. So you spend your days thinking deeply about behavior, why people browse, why they buy, why they don't. Do you see any crossover between buyer behavior and listener behavior?
Oh yeah, I mean, all human behavior is essentially, is pretty similar across everything. So yeah, when we're trying to do the podcast and think about who to bring on and what to talk about, it's exactly the same process of thinking. Right, we've got people who we want to listen to this, who are in a particular role, and are in a particular area, interested in particular topics. So how can we invite people on who are going to link up with that, who are going to matter to those people, who they're going to be interested in? How can we get content and topics that they're going to be interested in? So, we sit within this sort of e-commerce is a kind of niche of its own. And then within that, we specifically talk about promotions, which are part of conversion rate optimization, which again is a niche. But there's lots of little other areas we can talk to and bring people in on. So especially in these initial episodes, I've been trying to focus on trying to cover lots of the basic topics. So we've had an episode on merchandising, which is a big topic. We've had an episode on metrics. We've had an episode on data in general. I've got an episode actually going out on Wednesday coming up about AI. So it's just trying to cover some of these broad topic areas. And I'm sure once we've covered most of those, it will then start going into more kind of like more specific kind of niches around that. But yeah, it's exactly the same process of thinking, if you're selling a product, you're trying to think, there's an audience for this. How do I make this incredibly clear to them what the benefits are so they'll buy it? In the case of a podcast, how can I make clear the benefits of listening to this so they'll listen to it and engage with it? And that's always the goal of whatever we're trying to do, whether it's content or products we're trying to get in front of people.
So what makes someone stay with the podcast the same way they would with a product?
I think it's just quality. Like the same thing as it's always a bit difficult for me to admit this as a marketer, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to how good the product is, and that's what will get people to stay. So people will stay with us if our product, if RevLifter delivers on the things they want us to deliver on, if we solve their challenges and they're happy with us. And it's the same with a podcast. If it keeps giving people, I think there's two elements to it. So this is a bit of history. So we have an organisation in the UK called the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, and they were founded by a guy called Lord Reith, and he had a whole thing that the purpose of the BBC, the purpose of all the outputs, so the TV programmes, radio shows it put out, was two things: was to educate and entertain. And he said this. This was a very long time. It was in the 1930s, whatever. When he said this. It's still very true, and I think it's true of most content you put out, and podcasts exactly the same. We're here to educate, so we hope to teach people something about e-commerce they might not know, get an expert on who might be able to tell them about something that they might not know and give them something to think about. But also we're trying to make it entertaining, so it should be an enjoyable listen. It should be a bit of a chat, a bit of a conversation between two people. If it can try to be sort of fun and a bit entertaining, I think that's when it works really well. And those are the two things that will bring people back: is I'm learning something, and this is kind of entertaining and fun as well, and that's what I'm trying to aim for. Whether I pull that off is a different matter. But.
So, I mean, maybe this is far too soon to tell, but do episodes have their own conversion moments as such?
Oh, that's interesting. No, I don't know. I haven't looked into that too deeply at the moment because it's too early days. But I typically find, what I'll say is broadening it out to all our marketing. What works really well in terms of getting people to then follow up from that and then come to RevLifter and speak to us is whenever we specifically address a challenge and are really quite direct about the fact that is something we can help with. So there are some episodes. It's quite tricky when the episode's in flow and you're just talking to someone, you're having a conversation, to remember to jump in with like something which might steer the conversation towards RevLifter and what we do. But there are a few things that come up in some of the episodes where it's like, some of the guests are very good and kind of saying, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe that's something something that RevLifter could help with when they understand what we do." So that's nice. But yeah, I think it's more about making sure the content sits around what we do, so that it's an obvious follow-on from that to sort of say, this is something you're struggling with. So the last episode we did was about merchandising. Merchandising is all about how you put products in front of people, how the experience of them seeing the products, whether on a website or whatever, how they're presented, what that makes them think about it, how it affects their perceived value of those products. And how that then affects whether they're going to buy them or not, what they're going to buy, how much they're going to spend. And obviously promotions can be part of that. They can intervene in that merchandising. You can do product recommendations. You can display things in different ways. You can use discounts. So, there's a direct relevance there, and it's kind of trying to link those two things together so that naturally flows into potentially a sales conversation. But I would say that my main goal with the podcast is to make it interesting to listen to, because if we just focus it on being kind of almost like an advert, a long advert for RevLifter, no one would listen. So trying to balance those things, but use it as a way to say, let's create something interesting. But then off the back of that, if there's a chance to push people towards us, then obviously that's great.
Okay, if you applied a behavioral lens to podcasting, what would you change about how the episodes are structured?
Ooh, that's interesting. I think what I do find quite interesting about podcasts, and I've definitely noticed that running Browser Basketball, even for a short amount of time, is they're very. I think this is because of the way they're presented. A podcast is essentially a bunch of audio files presented in a feed based on time. So there's this episode, then the next one, that come out weekly, fortnightly. In our case, it's only monthly, but others, come out weekly. And it's really interesting. There's very much a recency bias, I think, to people who listen. So they're only really interested in listening to the newest one. They'll immediately go to the very latest episode and listen to that. And I think that's true of me. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And if I found a new one, I would listen to the first episode, the latest episode, and then sign up if I was interested and keep listening. I wouldn't necessarily go back to the back catalogue and look through the archive, where there might be tens, hundreds of episodes, some podcasts, thousands of episodes going back. When actually there could be some really interesting ones further back. And I've definitely noticed that, initially in that first month when the episode comes out, the listens grow over the month. But not many people go back and listen to some of the earlier ones. Those numbers stay quite static after a while. And I think, if there was a way, and I think it's just, a lot of the way podcasts are presented in Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever they're presented on a website, is the most recent first. And actually, so there's some really interesting stuff further back that's got nothing to do with when it was recorded. It's just generally interesting. It's an interesting guest. It's an interesting topic. So if there was a way of kind of surfacing things without taking the sort of age of them into account, because I think, that's that sort of recency bias people have of newer stuff is always better and more interesting, more up to date, kind of stops you from learning from something that might be a little bit older. And if there's a way of sort of changing behavior around that, I think it would be beneficial.
That's cool. So do you think it's just the recency bias that plays into that? Or is there an element of the niche and possibly the things that are being discussed? So maybe the content that's being created isn't evergreen?
Potentially, although I don't necessarily know if I've seen that. I think it's just the feature of, and I've been marketing a long time, and you have this with blog posts as well. I mean, you do get some blog posts which are older, which tend to stay high, for example, because Google indexes them well and they come back up. We have a podcast, we have a blog article that comes up every year. It's about how to run a Christmas campaign. So over Christmas, that article starts November, December. That article shoots to the top of Google. Once in January, it drops out again, and it keeps coming back up every year. But I think there is an element of that which is, people might look at it, but they might look at it and go, well, this article's now 2 or 3 years old. Is it really as up to date as it should be? I do think we, as people, have a bias towards recency. But I mean, it's potential that I think also, so some of we've got some older episodes now which they've got really good guests and topics, but those guests are continuing to appear on other podcasts and talk about those topics as well. So there's perhaps a little bit of competition when there's a more recent version of the same person talking around the same topic. That would probably be more interesting to someone than the older episode that they're not seen before. But I do think the recency thing is quite big. But there's probably some other factors at play as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the recency thing is big because if I look at my own patterns of behavior when I'm finding a new podcast, it's very much about what's the topic? Does that appeal to me? Sorry, not the topic, the title. Does that appeal to me? And then listening to the first few seconds to see if I want to keep listening, and then jumping around. But I think what I can say about Podjunction, so when we first started this a couple years ago, the first several episodes didn't get listened to for a long time, and it was as people started discovering them. But now I've got people going back and listening to those first few that never saw the light of day when they were first aired.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe that will happen to us. As you say, we haven't been going very long so far, but maybe as you say, when we've got a lot more episodes, people might go back a bit more and look at the earlier ones. But we'll see. We'll see over time.
Yeah. Just going back to what we were talking earlier about podcast growth and repurposing content, what do you think most businesses misunderstand about using a podcast to support growth of their business?
Yeah, I think it's, and again, I overtake a lot of these things and broaden them out to all the marketing stuff I do. But the question is always, the expectation from people outside of marketing and say senior leadership is around growing the business is expecting it to happen quite quickly, wanting things to happen in the short term. If this is going to work, it's going to work very quickly. But and I say this about the podcast, but I say it about lots of things we do as well. These things aren't going to help quickly. Like, there aren't that many marketing tactics, things available to a business to help them grow very quickly in a short space of time. And expecting that to be the case, with something like a podcast, which is all about really, as you say, about thought leadership and about growing your kind of reputation and making sure people see you as a wise oracle in the space you work in. That's going to take time. It's going to take time to build that up. It's going to take time to build a bank of episodes. It's going to take time to build up a listenership or a viewership, because most podcasts now have video as well. It's going to take time to do that. But and most of marketing, it takes time. It takes time to build up, your following, your social following, your email list, the people coming to your website, adding more content. All of that stuff takes time. And so, yeah, it's just about the fact it will work and it will help. Don't give up too easily. I've done podcasting at a couple of other businesses, and yeah, I would say a couple of others that I've tried before, they gave up quite quickly. They did 2 or 3 episodes, went, hardly anyone's listening, and just gave up. And you're not going to build up much of an audience in that time. You've got to keep at it. You've got to understand the network effects of it, how it can help you, how it can boost. Make sure you're taking advantage of the networking opportunities, the connecting opportunities. Keep finding people. Like the podcast is kind of supported by everything we do. So I find a lot of the guests that we get, we sponsor conferences, we do conferences and things in order to try and get in front of retailers. And I meet people there who are also talking or also on panels, and they sound interesting and got something interesting to say. And I'll get them. So we're planning an episode in December about branding, and that's someone I met at a conference in Manchester who was talking about e-commerce branding, and it's like, you'd be a really good person to have on. So yeah, the whole thing kind of supports itself. And as we do the podcast, that's content to help share. It helps find people, helps connect us with people, helps connect us with partners, and partners introduce us to other partners or introduce us to other retailers. So I think, yeah, the 2 things I'll say is that it'll take some time, but stick with it, because it will over time it'll really benefit. And number 2, remember that it's an interconnected. Never. Okay, getting into my general frustrations as a marketer. Don't think of channels and activities in isolation. They are part of your whole. All of your marketing is holistic. Treat everything holistically. This will help all of your other bits of your marketing, and all your other bits of your marketing can support this as well. So, think of everything holistically and let it all grow over time and compound over time and grow your network over time. That's how it will really benefit you and help drive business growth in the long term.
Yeah. Absolutely. Podcasting is a long game, and consistency is key. But
Yes.
what you're saying just then about look at marketing holistically, don't look at it as in isolation. Are you saying don't think of each marketing stream as a separate funnel, but everything is working together, so there's multiple entry points?
Yeah, basically, like all the one of the dangers I have, and this is slightly off topic of podcasting, but one of the dangers I think I see a lot of people when they're thinking about marketing is, people think about channels, they think about email, or they think about social media, or they think about a podcast. Right, we're doing a podcast, so let's consider the podcast in isolation. What is that doing? How is that helping our business grow? How is it contributing to our pipeline? What's it doing? But that is quite a dangerous way of thinking, because you end up, it becomes a bit of a race to the bottom, where you're just evaluating everything in and of itself and trying to optimize everything. And eventually you'll come to the conclusion, if you really follow that logic through to its conclusion, you'll end up thinking that nothing really adds particularly much value, because you're reducing it all down far too much to its base elements. Everything supports everything else. So as I say, our podcast, that's people. I find people for that at events. Because of doing that, I speak to people at events and talk to them about the podcast, and that helps create connections. And we meet people, and we've absolutely found partnerships through doing the podcast. And partnerships have helped us produce the podcast. And the podcast goes on our website, and that's content, and it supports our website, and it supports our website and things like SEO and being easy to find. And the podcast's got its own website, and that website backlinks to our main website, our RevLifter website. And so that supports the SEO of that. And when people come on, obviously they share it. So all these things interlink and work together. So yeah, I'd just say it's quite dangerous. And our email, should we send a weekly email newsletter, and we talk about the podcast in that, and the episodes get linked in that, and then so the whole thing just supports itself. They all support each other, and so it's about growing everything together rather than thinking this is a thing in isolation. It's like, it's part of our marketing, and all our marketing works together to support RevLifter, what it does, and help it grow.
Thank you for explaining it that way. I think that's really helpful. Earlier on, you were saying about how difficult it is to find guests. And you were saying now that when you're networking with people, that's when you're looking for guests as well. So what is it for you personally? Is it finding those networking events and finding the right people there? Or is there something else that's the frustrating part?
No, so the frustrating part, I'd say initially, so we decided to launch the podcast, and so initially it was like, right, going to do this. Who can we get on? And so it was initially making a list of people and saying, right, these would make good guests, whether they were people we knew or people who we didn't know, but we could try, a bit of cold outreach and see if they'd be open to it. So I remember initially I must have sent out about 20, 30 emails to people just saying, hey, we're doing this thing. And I think part of that's the challenge of, at that point, it didn't exist. So I did get some people responding and going, where's the website for this or the presence for this? Where is it? And I'm like, well, we haven't started it yet. We haven't done the first episode. Once we've got an episode, we'll set everything up. There's no point setting everything up before we've got any content to put in it. But yeah, so that created a bit of a problem at first of credibility. But yeah, there was just a lot of the people I tried to reach out to initially and do any of that cold outreach just didn't respond. Or responded just sort of, some people said yes, up for it and interested, and then just went very quiet. It's just that thing of anyone who's ever done cold outreach sales for a company as well, it's exactly the same. You might get an initial engagement, but then it goes very quiet, or some people just ignore you, or some people just flatly refuse. And so you're just going, it's a numbers game of trying to reach as many people, and they say no or yes or no, and then you don't hear from them. But it's definitely helped. Yeah, they're doing that. So actually, I became more aware of that after doing a few episodes, and paying a few guests come on helped because they commit to it because they have to. But then it's just as the process of doing it has made me start to think when I go to conferences to be a bit more aware of, oh, that person was really interesting. They did a really good presentation, or that person on that panel was really good, and then approaching them at the event immediately afterwards and saying, hey, we've got a podcast, will you come on? Or reaching out afterwards and just sending them a message. And that actually has worked much better. I think that engagement and that relevance at that point works a lot better to get people to commit. So doing that, I've pretty much not had anyone say no. Just saying to them, hey, you were really... I think it's also that slight thing of buttering people up and saying, you were really clever, good on there. You were really smart. Could you share your incredible intelligence and wonderfulness with our audience? And people would just say, yeah, of course. So yeah, that works really well. But you've got to remember, obviously, you've got to be doing those events, and you've got to remember that, oh yes, this is one thing I'm looking for at this event. I'm not just trying to sell my company. I'm also looking for podcast guests. But yeah, as long as I'm keeping that in the back of my mind, then yeah, I remember to invite people.
Is that why you ended up putting money behind the guests?
Partly, but also partly, as I say, I wanted to give it a bit of a boost in the early days. So the first two guests I had on, so the first one was a guy called Richard Shotton, who's a behavioral science expert, and he's written 3 books now on behavioral science. He's quite well known in the marketing community as being a behavioral science expert. So he was someone I thought, behavior as an element we're interested in, so it's really good to get someone who's really got a qualified expert in that area. But also, yeah, he's already got a decent following. He's well known. And the second guy was a guy called Dave Harland, who's a copywriter. He's quite well known on LinkedIn. He's quite a funny guy. He's got quite a bit of a following as well. So it's just like, the main thought with those first two is, yes, it got them to commit, and at least it meant I had 2 committed guests right off the bat. And they had a decent profile, so it meant we'd start with a bit of a bang rather than, I could have just put someone on who we knew but didn't have quite such a big profile, but it would have been quite a slow start, I think. And I think I want to keep up that mixture as we go along. I'd like to try and find a few more high profile people who might want to be paid, and that's fine. We've got some budget to do that occasionally, but also mix them in with the kind of, the lesser known people, but who have something interesting to say. I think it's kind of a case of mixing those kind of people together to make it as successful as possible.
Cool. So what else do you have in mind for Browse Basket Buy going forward?
Oh, I've got so many ideas. So I mean, obviously keeping the podcast going, keeping the episodes going for long enough to prove whether it really is something that's working. Because it's definitely not been going long enough. I mean, I think we're up to 6. This is going to be 6th episode. I think we're just coming up to. So carrying it on into next year and trying to do a whole year next year of it. I've got other ideas as well. I think what's interesting about once you've started, if you work for, so obviously if we approach people under the banner of RevLifter, it very much comes with the baggage of, we're obviously coming to you because we're trying to sell you RevLifter. And so at some point, even if this is a networking event or something quite friendly, we're probably going to try and pitch you at some point. The advantage of having a kind of almost like a separate brand that is a sort of media brand is like, well, we can use that as a banner to go and talk to people, and that might be a bit less scary because we're not going to try and sell you Brown's Basket Buy because Brown's Basket Buy hasn't got anything to sell. This is just about a network and a community and content and talking about interesting things. So I do think there's potentially, and we'll have to see if we have time for this. RevLifter is only a startup and we've got quite limited resources, so it depends whether it's doable. But I think, if we did some small networking events, for example, we could do those under the name of Browse Basket Buy rather than RevLifter, and therefore present them as more of a friendly, just come and talk about, what's going on in e-commerce and how that affects you and the things you're worried about. So I think it could expand into something which is sort of slightly separate from RevLifter, but helps support RevLifter's mission. It's kind of like that could be the community channel that attracts lots of people, gets people listening, gets people engaged. And then at some point, it's brought to you by RevLifter. So at some point that's going to connect to RevLifter, but it's a much friendlier face that's less about selling to people, and therefore might work better as a way of growing a potential audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are happy to come and be on a podcast and talk, but don't want to be sold to.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're doing an episode a month. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's about what we can manage at the moment. I'd love to do one a week, or there are some podcasts that do one a week, but at the moment once a month is about as much as we can manage.
You can handle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thank you so much. This has been fun. Thank you for sharing what these early days of podcasting are looking like for you and how you're bringing your understanding of buyer behavior into it as well.
No worries at all. It was great. It was great to be here today, and thank you for lots of very smart questions, Sadaf. It's been great.
You're very welcome. But before you go, Dan, if our listeners want to reach out and connect with you or learn from you, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. So I'm Dan Bond on LinkedIn. I do have, or you can go, there is the Browse Basket Buy website, browsebasketbuy.com, has a contact form on it. If you fill that in, I'm the person who picks that up. Or the RevLifter contact form, I'm the person who picks it. I run marketing, so I pick up everything. Try any of those things. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place. I think I come up first. If you Dan Bond, it's RevLifter. So yeah.
Awesome. So to those listening, thank you for being here. All the links that Dan has just mentioned can be found in the show description. So do reach out and connect with Dan and check out his podcast too. Thanks for joining me. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.